We're going to use Dreamweaver in this course to edit our web pages, and we need to configure Dreamweaver to connect to our remote server. So in this video, I'm going to show you all the important details. To launch Dreamweaver, you're going to go down to the Finder. The Finder is like a file manager. It also has a link to all your applications, and you want to look in Applications, you want to look for Dreamweaver, and launch the icon. Once Dreamweaver loads, it might take a while. On the right side of Dreamweaver are various panels, and one of the panels, which may or may not be open, is the Files panel. And if you don't see the Files panel, you can actually activate it by going in the window and clicking Files, and you'll be able to see the Files panel. The Files panel allows you to create a new website and manage the files both remotely and locally. And what I'm going to do is just run you through the process. There's a little drop-down menu here that shows you all your sites. You probably have no sites. And there's a link to Manage Sites. When you click on Manage Sites, you'll be able to create a new site. And it brings you through a wizard. If you don't see the wizard, you might have to click up at these top tabs, and you want to click on the basic wizard. The first thing we want to do is give the site a name. I'm going to suggest that you name the site after your team name. I'm going to pretend that I'm on Team 10. And then it wants to know the HTTP address of your site. In this case, if you remember, our URL for our websites is team10.sienacs.com. Then you're going to click Next. Do you want to work with server technology? Actually, we do. In this class, we're going to use PHP MySQL. And this basically lets Dreamweaver know that many of our pages will actually be PHP documents, not just web pages. This is the most important question. It asks us, how do you want to work with your files during development? And there are three options. One option is to work totally locally, so you could just create web pages that you could view on the computer, or you can edit them locally and then you can upload them to the remote server, or you could edit directly on the remote server. I like this option because it allows us to develop pages, test them locally, and then we can upload them to the remote server when they're ready to go. Before we start, we need to also specify where we're going to store our files locally. Now, you guys also have a home directory. I'm going to click on my home directory. I've already created a folder called Websites, and I also created a folder called Team 10. I don't really care where you store your files locally, as long as it's in your home folder. This is important because your home folder is actually backed up on the file server. You can access your home folder from any computer. So I want to make sure you save it there. I would suggest creating a new folder there and give it some name so that you know where your files are. After we're done, we need to specify how to connect to the remote server. We're going to use FTP. If you remember from previous video, the URL of the FTP server is ftp.sienacelbaks.com. Instead of specifying the folder that we're going to use, I've created FTP login accounts, in this case team10@sienacelbaks.com. And these FTP accounts directly map into your team's folder. And I just need to remember the password. And I'm going to test the connection. And it worked. Now we're not going to use secure FTP. It'll actually slow things down. I don't believe the server supports secure FTP. So we're pretty much done. It wants us to specify the URL again, which is team10.sienacs.com. And I'm going to just test the URL to make sure the site is up and live, and it's up and live and ready to go. And the last thing it's going to ask us is if we want to enable checking in and checking out. I actually don't think that Dreamweaver does a good job with file check-in, so I'm going to select no, and we're going to talk about that later and why Dreamweaver doesn't really do a good job of managing that. So it looks like we're all done. We're going to click done twice, and the site is ready to go. Now just to show you, you should now have a site that's named after your team, and you can actually view the local files, which you should have no local files, or you could view the remote files. And when you view the remote files, it's going to connect to the server. It takes a second. And hopefully you shouldn't see any other files. You might see an FTP quota file. There might be some other default file there, but it should be empty. And just to show you some other features, this button connects and disconnects from the server. So right now we're disconnected from the server, and here we'll connect. It can take about a minute to connect. This refreshes the view. This pulls files. It actually gets the files from the server. This will put files on the server. It's got a synchronize, so it can synchronize the two sites, the local site and the remote site. And I like this one. This actually expands the window into a typical FTP view where you can view your local files on the right and your remote files on the left. And if you click it again, it'll go back to this compact mode. What I want you to do now is I want you to move to the local view. I want you to right mouse click on the site and create a new file. And I want you to call this file index.html. And after you create it, I want you to double click on it. And you can open up this web page in the design view. You can see that Dreamweaver adds the necessary code to make this a compliant HTML document. In the design view, I can give it a title. I can call it my first web page. In the body of it, I could also write my first web page. And I can then highlight this and edit it whatever way I like. I'm actually going to make it a level 1 header. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click Save. And then here's where I like to do all of my site editing and site maintenance. I'm going to click on the file. Notice that I'm in the local view, and I'm actually going to upload it. I'm going to put it on the server. It takes a while. It's putting it on the server. And if everything is working, I should be able to launch a web browser, and I should be able to go to team10.siennacs.com, and there it is. That's my first web page. And that pretty much shows you how to connect Dreamweaver.